This is the biggest rock slide in Canadian history. You've probably never heard of it. 17 miners that night ended up trapped deeper than anyone, closer to the slide than anybody else in the valley. By any reasonable math, they should have been the first to die. All 17 survived. The people asleep in their beds a couple hundred meters from the mountain didn't. 1903, the Canadian province of Alberta. At the foot of Turtle Mountain's South Peak sits the young town of Frank, about 600 people. The town isn't laid out by accident. One half sits right against the slope, the other set back from it. In a few minutes, that difference will decide who lives and who doesn't. On the evening of April 28th, 17 miners head underground for a routine night shift. Nothing unusual about it. This shift has started the same way for years. Above ground, the town settles in for the night, just like it did yesterday and the night before that. None of them could have known what was happening inside the mountain. No instrument capable of detecting it existed anywhere on that slope, from its base to its summit. Turtle Mountain had been leaning over this valley for millions of years. The dense rock of the east face sat on top of much softer rock underneath, and cracks inside the mountain had been widening for decades. The mine at its base weakened the slope too, cutting coal out from directly under it and stripping away support, but as later calculations would show, only by a small margin, under 10%. The mountain was already doomed. It just needed one last push. Spring 1903 gave it that push. A heavy winter, a warm April, the snow melted fast, and the water ran straight into the cracks at the top of South Peak. Then, on the night of April 29th, the temperature dropped hard. People in the valley later remembered a frost below -18. The water in those cracks froze, and the ice, expanding, split apart what was left of the rock from the inside, like a wedge. At 10 minutes past 4 in the morning, the mountain gives way. A massive section of South Peak breaks loose and starts coming apart within seconds, shattering in midair, turning into a roaring flow of rock and rubble, roughly 35 million cubic meters in volume. Falling from more than 400 meters up, the mass picks up wet ground from the bed of the Crow's Nest River on the way down. Friction inside the flow drops, and it starts moving almost like a liquid. The same mechanism played out almost 70 years later on another continent, on the slope of Huascaran in Peru, where a similar mass of ice and rock gathered speed on its way toward the city of Yungay, grabbing wet ground as it went. We covered that slide in a separate video a few months back. In the Andes, and here in the Rockies, the mountain speeds itself up on water it steals along the way down. The flow, more than a kilometer wide, crosses the entire valley, and its own momentum carries it partway up the opposite slope. From the first rock failure at the summit to the moment millions of tons of stone finally stop moving, modern reconstructions put it at around 100 seconds. Under 2 minutes to permanently reshape an entire valley. When the dust settles, the difference between the two halves of town is written right into the ground. The west side, Dominion Avenue, with the bank and the school, stands completely intact. People there wake to the roar but aren't hurt. The east side, Manitoba Avenue, hard against the slope, where the coal company had built cottages for miners' families, is gone, along with the mine's surface buildings, a stretch of railway, and 7 homes. On the town map government surveyor William Boyd drew up a year later, in 1904, the boundary was marked with almost surgical precision. The debris field stopped exactly where Dominion Avenue started, as if the mountain itself had drawn the line between who it spared and who it didn't. The exact death toll has never been established. The range, somewhere between 70 and 90 people, stays uncertain because seasonal workers living in tents by the river were never counted. And a slide this thick can't physically be dug out. Most of the dead are still under the rock. Underground, those same 100 seconds look completely different. 17 miners feel the impact. A powerful blast of air tears through the tunnels, knocks men off their feet, and snuffs out every lamp at once. In the dark, with no idea yet how big this is, the shift starts working its way toward the main entrance and runs straight into a solid wall of shattered rock. A blockage nearly 90 meters long. What's happening above, they have to piece together from physical clues leaking down into the mine. The lower levels start flooding, which means somewhere out there, the Crow's Nest River has been dammed and is cutting itself a new path through the rock. An attempt to escape through the ventilation shaft fails. There's no air left to breathe, not enough even to keep a lamp lit. Step by step, in total darkness, all 17 men arrive at the same conclusion. Whatever happened above ground is far bigger than a collapse in their own tunnel. Waiting for rescue isn't an option. The coal seam they're working runs almost straight up into the mountain, and that same steepness, normally what makes the job miserable, is now their only way out. Miner Joseph Chapman proposes cutting a new tunnel the other way instead of digging out the blocked entrance, upward, straight through the seam itself, toward where it should break the surface higher up the mountain, above the collapse zone. Splitting into pairs, they work without stopping for 13 hours straight. Some accounts say 14, in the dark, with barely any air, hacking their way through coal and clay by hand. Around 5 that evening, the narrow tunnel finally breaks through, right underneath a rock overhang jutting out some 50 meters above the buried entrance. The same rock that nearly buried them now shelters them from debris still coming down. William Warrington, whose leg was broken in the initial blast, gets carried out by his crewmates on a wooden plank. All 17 make it out. Later, the mine itself got blamed for triggering the slide. The story was too convenient to let go of easily. But the geological cross-section along line A to B, built by geologists Richard McConnell and Reginald Brock for that same 1904 report, showed something else. The failure line had run well above the main mine workings. Their conclusion pointed elsewhere, an unstable mountain structure that had been building for thousands of years, with coal mining playing only a minor part. The creaking in the timber supports the miners heard as routine noise all year, turns out, on closer look, to be background static next to a far older, far slower process. One that started inside this mountain thousands of years before 1903. Up on the very edge of the slide, survivors turn up wherever the collapse happens to catch them. 15-month-old Gladys Ennis. Her mother finds her in the thick mud almost by feel and clears her airway with her bare hands. 3-year-old Fernie Watkins gets dug out from under broken boards. 27-month-old Marion Leach is thrown clear of her collapsing house by the blast wave, landing on a haystack that survived intact, the same instant her parents and 4 brothers die under the wreckage of that same wall. Gladys Ennis lived a long life. She saw the mine close, watched part of the town moved back from the dangerous slope, watched new roads cut through the frozen rock field. She died in the mid-1990s, one of the last people alive who'd lived through the morning a mountain that had stood there for tens of millions of years gave itself less than 2 minutes to come down.